All right, you made it all the way here at the end, level number 5 of practicing the blues. In today's lesson, we're going to dig into something that might be an overlooked part of your musicianship. In all honesty, I think it's a pretty difficult part of your musicianship. It's something that requires a lot of musical maturity, a lot of foundational skills need to be developed to do this well. Today, we're going to work on playing slow. All right, well, why do we need to worry about playing at these super slow tempos? We're talking about quarter note equals 60, quarter note equals 50, in that ballpark of BPMs. And we're not necessarily talking about playing a ballad at this tempo. We're talking about playing swing at this tempo. Really takes some rhythmic control to be able to do this well. For me, there are two main reasons why we got to worry about this. Number one is just practical. We encounter these tunes at these tempos sometimes out in the real world. If you've ever been asked to play one of these super slow tempos without really thinking about it or practicing it ahead of time, you might have fallen on your face pretty seriously. It's something that even though you might be sounding great at a medium tempo swing, even at sort of like 80, 70, somewhere in that ballpark, once those beats get so far apart from each other, we can sort of lose the sense about where our swing is, and our typical ideas don't seem to land the way they used to. The second reason we need to practice this stuff is more from a conceptual standpoint. If we can control swing and our subdivision at this tempo, once we go to a faster tempo, we are going to have a much more developed sense of where that feel is. So to get this happening, either at a slow tempo, like we're going to work on today, or at a faster tempo, it's all about subdividing triplets. Now, surely when you were in like high school jazz band, you might have seen like up in the other left-hand corner of your music where it says like triplet equals quarter note and single eighth note, all with a triplet over it. That's kind of what we're talking about here, but we're really talking about internalizing a triplet feel while we still feel quarter notes. For me, this comes from thinking about the syllables doodle-la. These are very similar to our doodle tongue type of syllables, but we're going to think about them specifically as how they help us feel the time. Those are going to fit onto our triplet grid that we're creating. So we are going to be thinking doodle-la, 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 continuously in our head as we're playing this. And for me, I know I also like to think about a slight de-emphasizing on the middle triplet and a slight accent on the last one. Very subtle. So instead of doodle-la, 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 where they're even, I get doodle-la, 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 doodle-la. In all honesty, that's maybe even a little more emphasized than I would do it. You don't want to go too much. It's going to sound a little bit sort of overcooked if we do that. So it's all about subtlety, but feeling that constant triplet subdivision. Now you might say to yourself, Sean, why don't I just make the metronome play the triplets for me? This might be a good starting place, but eventually you want to internalize that subdivision. If you don't get this happening at the slow tempo or definitely at faster tempos, the accent will just never fit in the right place. You'll be saying the right phrases, but they just won't feel organic and authentic to the way this language is spoken. So you really got to work to internalize this with the metronome clicking quarter notes while you're feeling those triplets. Now, aside from just feeling the triplets, you want to think of some ideas that really spell out the triplets in your playing. That's going to help you feel where the time is, and it's also probably going to feel good from a vocabulary standpoint at these really slow tempos. Finding ideas like that really spell out the triplets in a melodic way are going to get you connected with where the rhythm section is on this. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean we only play triplets. We want to integrate these sort of ideas into the lines that we might already use. Let's hear just a little short 4-bar example. We're playing the first 4 bars of the blues with a metronome and see how I can go in and out of playing just absolutely triplets, and then sometimes just keeping the triplet subdivision in my head and letting it inform where I place the eighth notes in an eighth note line or a quarter note line. So that's the starting point. That type of playing could 100% take you through an entire solo. Now, if you want to explore some of the other rhythmic options that are available to you at this really slow tempo, you got to think about how do I integrate double time, possibly triple time or double time triplets into my playing in a way that still feels good at this really slow tempo. Let's start with just a standard double time. So if our quarter note is here, 1, 2, 3. If we want to feel where the double time is, rather than feeling those triplets, for a moment, you're going to have to switch your brain into feeling eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, or whatever. You really have to be able to get into a swung 16th note mindset and be able to flip that switch really quickly so you can get to those type of lines. The ideas you could use would be the same as you would play on any 8th note or 16th note line. Really think about hitting changes, whatever type of ideas you want to use, but you really have to make sure that you can flip that rhythmic switch very quickly. And it might feel like it's fighting just a little bit against where the rhythm section is. So you really have to make sure you are swinging those 16th notes in a convincing fashion. Let's listen to a short example where I try to implement this strategy. Again, I'm going to play the first 4 bars of the blues. I'm really only going to try to go to double time near the end of this phrase, kind of where that 2-5-1 going to the 4 chord is. This change in rhythmic feel can help add some variety to your solos, kind of changes up the rhythmic feel just enough that we get out of that triplet stuff for a second and we get back to it. It kind of feels fresh again, it feels good. I would caution you about using this too much. Don't go to the well too much on the double time or else it sort of like loses its effect. And you don't just want to double time your entire chorus. You want to like let this tune be slow. Find some ideas inside that tempo. The other direction you can go, and in all honesty, the place where I find myself going more often on these really slow tunes, is thinking double time triplets, essentially making this into like a 12-8 feel. So again, if you're feeling 1, 2, 3, I'm going to start to feel where the triplets are. Da 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 da. Then double time on those. Da 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 da, and so on and so forth. That's going to give me this double time triplet feel. Now, when you get to playing this way, those measures are going to start to feel really long because you're fitting a lot of melodic content into these 4 bars, lots of notes. So it's very easy to sort of jump ahead accidentally, so you really have to be disciplined about where you are in the changes in the form. Let's hear this example on the last 4 bars of the blues, so on the turnaround where the 2-5-1 occurs. So I'm really consciously trying to get to that sort of time feel. Would I always do this here? No. I would kind of choose to use it creatively and hopefully tastefully. And I might not actually do as much as I'm doing in this example here. This is just to really kind of show how this rhythmic feel can work in a tune. Again, with a metronome. All right, to practice this stuff, just like anything else, you have to set yourself small parameters in order to see improvement on these things. You can't just say, well, I'm just going to practice slow. That's not going to get you anywhere. Say, all right, well, I'm going to practice slow, and at every 2-5, I'm going to go to double time, standard double time. Or every 2-5, I'm going to try to hit this triplet double time. Or maybe I'm going to use this technique in one place and this technique in another place. Let's go back to that very first chorus I opened up this lesson with. I'll put the transcription on the screen so you can see where I went to these different rhythmic feels. I intentionally did that because I knew I was going to talk about it in this lesson, and we can see how those different areas work. Hopefully this gets you going thinking about this, what I find to be a quite challenging part of our musicianship. People call these grown folks tempos for a reason. They really take a lot of command of your instrument, a lot of command of the language to be able to play successfully. We might think, well, practicing slow must be easy. And it is to a point. Once you kind of reach far enough down in that tempo range, it starts to become more difficult from a sort of different perspective rather than just like playing the notes and rhythms. It's all about, can it make it feel good at these slow tempos? All right, we'll see you in the woodshed.